Like anyone that was at one point a 13-year-old, I spent a sizable amount of my adolescent social development playing the dude, wouldn't it be messed up if game. If you're unfamiliar, the premise is to say, like, oh man, wouldn't it be messed up if, then you describe something messed up that you just thought of. Also, if you're unfamiliar, you probably shouldn't be watching this channel. These topics are far too grim for 12-year-olds. Learning about this stuff too early can have disastrous consequences, like becoming a YouTuber. Anyways, while that game is a perfectly functional way to pass time with friends, it becomes an issue when that's seemingly also the method for coming up with secret government experiments. So for today's episode of Bad Stuff the Government Did in the 60s, we're going to take a look at MKUltra Subproject 68, aka the Montreal experiments. So unlike some of the more recent videos I've done, this story is less of a shadowy, sprawling network and more of a straightforward description of a bunch of weird shit one guy absolutely did. So let's talk about the guy, Donald Euan Cameron. Cameron was born in Stirlingshire, Scotland in 1901. He studied psychiatry at the universities of Glasgow and London, eventually getting his MD in 1936. He wound up practicing and teaching at universities in Baltimore, Switzerland, Massachusetts, Albany, and, as we will later come to learn, Montreal. Now, in addition to being a preeminent member of the medical field, Cameron also had a philosophy and worldview that could be described as terrifying. He viewed society as being split into the weak and the strong. The weak consisted of people with insecurities or anxieties and were destined to be ruled by the strong. He also viewed mental illness as a social contagion. His view is that by being able to interact with others, people with anxiety or depression or any other number of mental illnesses would be able to spread their mental illness to others. He wrote more about this in a lecture he called Dangerous Men and Women, in which he makes up a bunch of dudes to get mad at. These archetypes are as follows. 1. A passive man who is afraid to say what he really thinks and will stand for anything and stands for nothing. He was born in Munich. He is the eternal compromiser, and his spiritual food is appeasement. 2. The possessive type, filled with jealousy and demanding utmost loyalty. This personality type poses a danger to those closest to them, especially children. 3. The insecure man. They are the driven crowds that makes the army of the authoritarian overlord. They are the stuffing of conservatism. Mediocrity is their god. They fear the stronger, they fear the new idea. They are afraid to live and scared to die. This third type needs conformity and obeys the dictates of society, adhering to a world of strict standards of right or wrong, which are manipulated by power groups to keep the insecure controlled and dependent. Cameron theorized this type is dangerous because of its lust for authority. Okay, he has a point here. And 4, the last type is the psychopath, the greatest danger in times of political and societal upheaval. This, Cameron labeled the Gestapo. Oh, also, he wanted to do race science on the Germans, to see how they like it, I guess. However, the thing Cameron is really best known for is his development of a technique called psychic driving, during a series of experiments from 1957 to 1964. Cameron was paid $69,000 a year, or almost $800,000 in 2024 dollars, to carry out these experiments at a lab at McGill University by a third party who was totally, definitely the CIA. Like they admitted it. These experiments, known by their internal codename MKUltra Subproject 68, were considered to be unethical enough that the CIA required that they be performed on French Canadians. So, what were these experiments? What was the purpose? Well, the official reason given at the time was that they were attempting to treat or cure schizophrenia. The process went like this. You do something that, according to 1950 standards, warrants being institutionalized. For example, being a woman. Next, some Scottish weirdo comes in and injects you with Thorazine and insulin to induce a coma. Then for 2 to 3 weeks, they hook you up to like a ECT machine and really just shock the shit out of you. Some patients were shocked upwards of 300 times. Like, they're trying to demagnetize you. This was intended to erase all your memories, in order for them to be added back later. Now, I'm not a psychologist, or a psychiatrist for that matter, but I am pretty sure I see a hole in this plan. But anyways, after factory resetting you brought out of the coma, given a form of paralytic, and then you have your head placed into what I can really only describe as a contraption. The doohickey consisted of a football helmet with an integrated blindfold and pair of headphones, in order to achieve full sensory deprivation. The closest comparison that I can make here is probably like the black dumpling from Elden Ring, like the shit they put on the heads of the like Albinorex at the Volcano Manor. Yeah, we were doing that. Anyway, these headphones were set up to loop a single sentence continuously. This would be performed by the subject who was restrained or under the effects of a paralytic. Additionally, it's alleged that some subjects were also administered psychoactive drugs like LSD. The subject would be sustained via an IV and a feeding tube, and the looping audio would play 24/7. This stage of the treatment would last upwards of a month, with the tape looping hundreds of thousands of times. One recorded case had the patient undergo this stage for 101 days.
Make longer YouTube videos. Make longer YouTube videos. Make longer YouTube videos. Make longer YouTube videos.
And then finally, the university would say, "All right, we fixed him, you're welcome," and the patient would be returned to their family. Now, this will come as a surprise to nobody, but this unspeakably horrifying ordeal generally did not help that much. Subjects would frequently return with retrograde amnesia, incontinence, not knowing how to speak or read, not remembering their parents or family, thinking that the CIA guys were their parents. Some wound up recovering with the aid of years of treatment by not evil psychologists and therapists, but many didn't and were left with significantly life-altering psychological damage. As it turns out, the reason that the CIA funded this research was not, in fact, to help cure people's schizophrenia, but rather to engage in their long-standing pastime of fucked up mind control shit. There remains debate about whether or not Cameron was aware that the research was being funded by the CIA. While it's hard to imagine that he wasn't aware, that's the stance taken by his wife and children. However, upon his unexpected death in 1967, they also elected to immediately burn all of his notes and research before anyone could ever discover it, which isn't typically the reaction. If I had to guess, possibly the most accurate summary of the matter would probably come from the author Edward Shorter, who said that the CIA angle is irrelevant, and that Cameron would have done exactly the same experiments without CIA money. So what happened to the patients? Well, like I said, most of them had their brains scrambled. Really, really awful stuff. What happened to Donald Cameron? Was he ever brought to justice? Did he ever face consequences? No, of course not. He was made president of the American Psychiatric Association temporarily. He died in his mid-60s with his family while hiking of a heart attack. He's in hell, though. Like, he's, getting pitchforked.